Hello and welcome back to the High Performance Nursing Podcast. I'm so excited that you are all here today. Today we are having I'm going to call it a career chat. We're diving into an amazing clinician's career and exploring where they started and where they are now and what amazing tips, wisdom, experiences that they have to share with us today. So today we have the amazing Kate Hoskin. Welcome to the podcast, Kate.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Oh, I cannot wait to dive in. Everybody that's listening, you're going to want to stick around for this episode because there's going to be so much goodness in here. I'm going to kick off with just letting you know a little bit about Kate, who she is, what she's been up to, and then we're going to dive into her career stories. So, Kate is an experienced emergency nurse and patient advocate with a passion for helping patients navigate the healthcare system. With over 15 years' experience in both public and private acute care settings, she has developed a keen awareness and understanding of how our health system operates and how to help patients find their way on their healthcare journey. She empowers patients to recognize inferior care and ask for better, as well as helping people understand where bias and other agendas might be impacting the advice they receive from healthcare providers, and hopefully inspire other healthcare professionals to return their focus to patient-centered care. I just got chills. Oh, I love that so much. And I love that whole recognize inferior care and ask for better. Oh my God.
Yeah,
Boom, that hit me right there.
yeah.
We're going to dive into all of that, but I want to kickstart this conversation with you telling us a little bit more about where you started your career and kind of tell us a synopsis of your career up until this point.
So basically, I've been spent most of my career in the private system in Melbourne. I had fell in love with the hospital that I did my graduate year at and found the leadership there to be very supportive. And I finished up my graduate year in the ED, and that's where I stayed. I love it. I found my place. And so I was very fortunate to have really supportive leaders throughout my career, both in my direct unit manager and the director of nursing and educators as well, were really supportive of me. So every opportunity I could have wanted to professionally develop was handed to me on a silver platter. So I quickly progressed through postgraduate studies, the advanced practice program, or the transition to specialty, depending on what your organisation calls it, and became a clinical nurse specialist. And then after that, just had a keen interest in education. So I did the Certificate 4 training and assessment so that I could start playing in that field and started taking on education in services and supporting my educator wherever I can in the CNS role to sort of, get that experience under my belt. I worked for 5 minutes after my postgraduate in educating at TAFE, Teaching Diploma of Nursing, and doing some clinical placements, some tutorials, all that sort of stuff. So I started to grow that experience as an educator, which was really enjoyable and really beneficial. And then after that, I got a secondment in my hospital to a clinical nurse educator role on the wards, which was a really great opportunity, again, where my director of nursing really believed in me and gave me an opportunity. So that was my first taste of the clinical educator role, which was so eye-opening for me. Like, it really blew my mind. Up until then, like, throughout your career, you focused on yourself, you're doing your own thing, you're just the nurse and everybody in the leadership is your enemy kind of thing, like you're fighting against them, but that really opened my eyes to behind the doors and how hospitals run and leadership and all that sort of stuff. So that was brilliant. And after that finished, I stepped into an ANUM role, and I did that for a few years around becoming a mother. So I came back and forth to that role and had 2 babies in a couple of years. And then when I came back to work after my experiences in childbirth, I stepped into my old clinical educator's role. She finally moved on, and that was perfect timing for me to step up into her role. So yeah, I jumped in probably a little bit before I was ready to, because I was right off the back of maternity leave. I'd had 12 months off and all that sort of stuff, and I didn't quite feel ready. But again, my people higher up than me believed in me and took a chance and supported me to step into that role. And yeah, again, I think I was a little bit naive stepping into that role as well. But I'd had a lot of learnt experience as a patient in my journey in motherhood to come back to work with. And then yeah, I don't know why I'd never seen it before, but for some reason when I sat in that office and sort of contemplated what this role of the clinical nurse educator was and the environment that I was doing it in, I was just like, all of a sudden had this huge awareness of how major this job was and that the organization I was working in had no governance. There
Mm,
was no protocols, there was no policies, there was no how to manage DKA, there was no how to recognize and manage sepsis because it was private, and all the consultants were just doing what they did because that's how they knew to do it, and no one was telling them to do it differently. And because I'd been raised in this organization, so to speak, I didn't know any better. I was just happy to do what my doctors had always told me to do. And I guess my experience in childbirth and maternal and obstetric healthcare, which I was completely ignorant and naive about as well, really opened my eyes to that your doctors don't always have your best interests in mind. There are agendas outside of your experience and outcomes at play. And I kind of was like, I've got so much work to do.
yeah.
And in that moment, I sort of just determined that I was going to set about to change the system.
No, no
I was,
small feat.
I just, I sort of was like, wow, I don't know. This is huge. Like, I've got so many policies to write, so many guidelines to teach. And because it was my role to teach the baby nurses what best practice standards were, but how do I do that without anything to reference? So I
Mm,
just, for the next few years, set about writing policies and teaching them and thought this would be fun. I'll just write the guidelines, I'll teach them, and everybody will pick up and
mm,
we'll make things better and patient experiences will be better and it will be more smooth for the nurses to all be doing the same thing rather than doing it how that doctor wanted it and different for that doctor and that kind of thing.
mm,
Um, and that, I guess, is where I ran into trouble because doctors and systems don't like to change. um, so, and that for me was really, really challenging. Like, I just couldn't understand. Here's a best practice guideline. It's evidence based. It's what all the other hospitals are doing in the public system. Why don't you follow it? And they just didn't. Like, I really could not understand why that was happening. And I guess over time and with perseverance and trying to implement change, and meeting a lot of resistance and a lot of challenge in that, I sort of realized that I can't change the system. Like, it was breaking me, and ended up having some really terrible experiences. Which required, disciplinary meetings and all this sort of stuff.
mm,
And it became really, really challenging work environment because I was so passionate about making them do better.
mm,
Um, and the resistance that was met with just really shattered me. And I was becoming a miserable person. I was
mm,
bringing it home with me. And it got to the point where my whole life was falling down around me.
mm,
And so I had to take some time off. So by this time I'd accrued my long service leave. So I just took 4 months off. And again, I had a very supportive director of nursing who could see where I was going. And she was like, yep, just take the time, do what you need. We'll be here when you're ready to come back, sort of thing. And then it was in that time off where I had time to decompress and reflect on what I wanted to do, and recognizing that I couldn't achieve it in the role that I was in, that I came up with the idea of Patient Advocacy Plus. I thought, I
mm,
did that. What do people come to me for? What am I good at? And I had so many friends and family who'd be like, my kid's sick, what do I do? Where do I go? Or that kind of thing. I'm like, oh, I could do this. Like, I could
no,
make a business out of this. And so the idea was born, and stayed in the idea stage for a solid 12 months.
enough.
I just, can I do this? How do I do this? I don't know if I can do this. And then, of course, the long service ran out and I went to resign, but my education manager convinced me to stay. And after that time off and sort of settling and regrounding and redirecting, I only lasted, I think, maybe 3 months back
Mm,
in that role before I was just no, I just can't. I just can't be here. I can't do it. I physically felt like I was being squished into a box, like of performance and behavior management and towing the line and, not challenging the status quo. And I'm like, this just isn't me. I just can't bide anymore. And so I resigned from the role that I'd worked my whole career towards,
Yeah.
which, oh, letting go of that, mate. Oh my God. That
Yeah.
took a lot. It was a huge, and this is like what you talk about too,
Mm.
where I let what I do become who I was.
Ah.
And so that felt like a real letting go of a part of me. So
Mhm.
that was really, really hard.
Mm.
Of course, that was in the beginning of COVID. So I think I was still in the educator role for the first few months of COVID and doing all the policy and retraining and all that sort of stuff. And then, yeah, I just was like, no, I can't, just can't. And so, yeah, took a step back, a massive step back, and joined a different organization in the public system and just went back to being an emergency nurse. And on the side, putting energy into my business and patient advocacy and figuring out how I could change the system from the outside rather than killing myself trying to change it from the inside. So, yeah, my business was born, and here I am plodding along. It's been probably 2.5 years now of patient advocacy plus and figuring out as I go what I want to do and how I can make a difference and change the system by empowering patients. And that's my absolute passion now. It just lights me up. So
Yeah, I love
there's that.
that. Oh my goodness, there is so much to unpack.
So
And
much.
I just love your career story. Like I think what I love about doing this podcast and talking to other people, selfishly, one, I hear other people go through the same thing that I went through, and it reminds my brain, like, oh
Yeah,
yes, Liam, you're not alone, and lots of people
yeah,
go through this process.
yeah.
And two, for other people to hear, how the ebbs and flows, the highs and lows of our career really do
Mm,
shape who we become. And it's when we really step into and listen to that intuitive part of ourselves, whether that's your brain, your gut, like whatever that is for you, and you really question, you go, hold on a minute, this used to light me up. It no longer
mm,
does. What's going on? Let me create some space. Like,
mm.
I'm hearing that that space, like, was the gift that you needed to give yourself
Yeah,
to then go, hold on, I've got a couple of paths here. You gathered
yeah,
all the facts and you went, okay, my heart wants me to stay, but my mind is telling me something different. Like, this is not good for you. And I think
yeah,
that you, like, obviously you've made the shift, but like, I'm proud of you and I hope you're proud of you because that
yeah,
is a huge shift. And like you say, it's hard. It's very,
yeah,
very hard. And
yeah,
I talk to people every day that want to make a similar shift and they do not give themselves permission. And
yeah,
really, that's what it comes down to, right? Like, if you remove the heart and the 10 years of working there and like the connection and the collaboration and the people, it comes down to making a decision and liking your reason why you made that decision. And I'm
yeah,
sensing, based on the smile on your face and like the way that you were
yeah,
talking about patient advocacy,
yeah.
you like your reason for doing that.
Yeah, yeah, I really do. And it's so interesting because, like, yeah, like I said, the smile on my face, it's not only just my career that I feel more content with, like, I've lost that desire or that compulsion to continue to progress because I feel like that's a real culture in healthcare is there's a lot of pressure for young nurses to progress, 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 achieve, climb higher, do more.
Mm.
Um, and I've let go of that. And I'm just so content being at the bedside with my patients, doing a good job, bringing my 15 years of experience to the bedside
Mm.
and I leave work smiling rather than stressing. I don't bring it home. And then I've got energy for my husband, for my kids, for my friends. Like, I'm drinking less wine, all
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. Like,
Yeah.
it just makes such a big difference to, I don't know if you can step out of that I don't know, I want to call it a cage that the health
Mm.
system can put you in and go, okay, why am I doing this? What do I love about it? And, I don't have to define myself by my role. Like, I don't have to have a job title or an employer or something to be able to bring my skills to the world to help people. So,
Totally. And I think that what you touched on there is what most people, and we both have gone through, is this idea of like, you almost grieve the loss of a part of you. You
Mm,
grieve the history of your life, the past, but you also grieve the future, right? Like
yeah,
what could have
yeah,
been, and your brain takes you to both ends of the spectrum. And I think that
yeah,
that's probably leaving the job is easy because we just have to resign, right? Like you literally
yeah,
send an email and you say, "Hey, I'm done." But what
yeah.
is hard is navigating the thoughts and the feelings that come up when you hit that send button or in the lead up to it and the perception of what people are going to think. How did you
Mm,
manage all of that? Because I'm sure there'd be people like you're doing what? You're going from educator back to bedside to set up an
yeah.
advocacy business? Like, what are you thinking, Kate?
I know. I think a small part of me deep down has always been, what's the word? I don't know. I think the advocacy part of it has always been a part of who I am, but it's a part of me that had been squashed through, childhood and all those messages that you get growing up and, coming into healthcare and that good girl kind of mindset had really subdued that part of me. So I think that part of it's always been there and stepping out of it has given me permission to reclaim that. And I've reclaimed
Mm,
that more and more the more of this work I do. Um, but I think, yeah, the letting go of who I was and what I would have been, gosh, that just took time. And I just gave myself space to grieve it, like
mm,
allowed myself a minute to adjust. And through that, like yourself, I've done a lot of personal development work. And that has really helped me to not get attached to outcomes and try and just go with the flow. So, and allowed myself to be content with who I am, not who I should be, kind of thing.
mm,
But yeah, it was really hard, and I know I did go back to a clinical educator role. It's probably close to 2 years now. The opportunity came up in the public system, and I was like, okay, I'll try it there. And it was too easy to get that job, like an organization that usually
mm,
only hires from within. And I didn't have the qualifications that all the other applicants had. I'd been out of the game for over 12 months, but I got this job so easily. And it was strange to me. But then again, I was lucky if I lasted 3 months back in that office
mm.
before the wheels of life started to fall off again. And so I was like, no, this isn't where I'm meant to be. It was just that little affirmation that I needed to be like, okay, you're on the right path. You don't have to keep reminding yourself that you're supposed to be here. So, and that really helped me to be solid in where I'm going, not where I was, sort of thing. Makes
I
sense.
love yeah, no, totally. I love that, and I think that there is something in this when you unsee yourself in a role that you
Mm,
like, if you keep trying to go back to that role, "I did this as well," it
yeah,
the life is gonna just keep teaching you the same lesson, and
yeah,
that's why I'm a big believer in that when we change our circumstances and we change the job, that
mm,
unless we really look internally and do the thought work and the feeling work,
yeah,
we're just changing the external world. We're taking the new job, but we're taking the same brain, right? With the same thoughts and the same
yeah,
programming and the same conditioned beliefs. And
yeah,
whilst I think some environments definitely leave them, if they're not serving you, that if we just look at it and think, when I change the circumstance, it's going to make it better. I think that
mm,
that's where we're a little like I was delusional for 12 years, thinking
yeah,
each job will
yeah,
be different and better. And I love that that's been your experience as well. I do believe that when we've been in something and we leave it or we apply for something and we don't get it and somebody else does, we can't unsee part of ourselves in that role or
yeah,
unsee the fact that we've outgrown it as well.
yeah.
It's like if you visit your
Yes.
family and you're looking around, you're like, what's happened here? No one's changed.
Yeah.
Everything's the same.
Yes.
And you've grown and you're like,
Yeah.
do I belong here? What's happening?
Yeah. And
Um,
I really struggled and that towing the line and delivering an agenda, for the good of the hospital rather than for the good of the people I was supposed to be teaching and mentoring. I was
mm, yeah, yeah, I love that. I think
like,
everybody listening to take away from that there, what Kate was saying, like, just because you can doesn't mean you should.
yes.
Like
And
that
that's what I said,
line,
like, I can do this job. Am I doing it because I can or
yeah.
because I really want to be here? And yeah, that was a huge deciding factor for
Yeah.
me. Yeah.
Yeah, and remember that everybody probably told Kate, "Kate, by the way, you're amazing at this. You can do this. You should
Yeah.
stay. You've got a great
Yes.
career ahead of you." And Kate was like, "No." I know me, and I know what I want. And
Yeah,
you still had all the drama, right? You still had all of those thoughts and you still had the confusion, but you just bet on yourself. And I think that's what's beautiful about your story. I love
yeah.
that so much. I want to ask, there's
Mhm.
so many things I want to ask, but I want to spend a lot of time on patient advocacy because I know it's so
Awesome.
important. I want to ask, based on we've got a lot of grads that listen, a lot of nurses that want to get into ED nursing.
Yes.
Number one, I want to ask, what was it like starting in a private graduate program as a grad? Because there's a lot of public versus private, and people say, oh, you can't do the private. So, what would be your one liner on that?
My advice, and I've given it to graduate and postgraduate students before, is that you get out what you put in.
Oh,
You
yes.
you can, because education support is inferior across healthcare, regardless of whether you're public or private, right? So
Mm,
you have to make the most of your opportunities. And if you've got one organization offering you your dreams, your opportunities, your goals on a silver platter, but it's private and you're returning it down for that, then I don't know. I feel like that's a wasted opportunity. And in the private system, my experience was that it wasn't as competitive. There weren't the dozens and dozens of
mm,
people applying for the same programs. And so you had a better opportunity of progressing more rapidly, which for me, like I went from graduate nurse to clinical nurse educator within 10 years.
oh,
Like
wow.
that's,
Yeah.
and I had two babies in that time.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
you know, I think, yeah, and people often said, particularly when it came to the postgraduate level of study, oh, but you trained in the private system, you're not a real ED nurse, like you wouldn't survive in the public system. Well,
Mm,
the skills are transferable. And if you're passionate and you work hard, you can take those skills anywhere. You just got to be brave enough to do it, I reckon.
I love
Step
that.
out of your comfort zone, and I've picked it up quite easily, but I've always worked hard and tried my best to be the best that I can. So you get
That's
out what you put in.
Oh, I
100.
love that so much. That's such a good piece of advice. And I also just need to acknowledge your use of the word inferior. I love that. Like that, like because I always talk about lack a lot. It's just a beautiful word. I'm just but the fact that like it's true, there is inferior education, there is
Yeah,
inferior leadership. So then what do
yeah,
we want to do about it? Right? Like what can we do about it that's within our power? I love that
yes.
so much.
Mm.
I wanted to ask you, based on your over a decade of experience in ED, what is the secret to sustaining and building a career in ED? Because it's hard in ED, right? Like to stay there long term. There's a lot of things happening, and there's a lot of highs and lows. I mean, there is everywhere, but ED in particular, ICU critical care. What do you
Mm.
think the secret to success is if you were to give somebody a little bit of information and insight?
Ah, they used to teach you at nursing school. I'll never forget, like philosophy of nursing, my first day of uni, to leave yourself at the door.
Mm,
Detach, don't feel, don't connect. Your patients need you to be professional and that kind of thing. And that's how I worked for a number of years until I became a mother and I was no longer capable of that approach. But I really found like just be human. Like,
mm,
if you need to feel your patient's experiences, feel it because that's better than suppressing it and going home and drinking, or that's better than becoming resentful of the patients that you're here to care for. Like, remember why you became a nurse. Like, became a nurse to help people like most people. I loved the science of it. I loved understanding how we could figure out what was wrong with people and how to put them back together. And for
mm,
me, that has always been a privilege. Um, so just reminding myself constantly of that, and that, every patient who comes to the ED is very easy to become jaded because you see people in such horrible situations every day that a sore toe does really grind your gears. But just remind yourself that nobody comes to an emergency because they don't think they need to be there. Like they come because they feel like they have an emergency, and it's our job to take care of them. So I don't know. I find because of course I have my moments where I've reached my
mm,
limits. I take a day off.
yeah.
Um, But so I think, yeah, that balance of humility and remembering that people are people and it's your job to
Mm,
help them, as well as recognizing when you've lost the capacity to view people and treat people as people and taking a minute off.
yeah.
I think that's something that we really don't value in healthcare, particularly at the moment. Overtime, extra shifts, show up, support your team. And I'm like, no, no, support yourself. If you're,
Mm,
taking care of yourself, you can take on anything. So
yeah.
yeah, I think it's just that balance really.
Yeah, I love that. I love reminding people like there's no healthcare without self-care, right? Like
Yes.
it's a good little slogan. It's a bit
It's
cheesy.
amazing.
Sorry, everybody, but it's, it just reminds me that like you've got to put yourself first, right? You've got to fill that
Yeah.
cup up first. And I just love that you mentioned like the humanizing the role and the job
Mm.
because you're
Yeah.
right. And I remember being taught that as well. I remember put on the
Mm.
facade and show up
Yeah.
and be and like I think that that's probably what's compounded our burnout, right? Is
Yeah.
because like we have literally been taught to not get in touch with our emotions, to
Yeah.
not cry when the family are crying because somebody just passed away. Like
Yeah.
it's negating the human experience. And I
Yeah.
think that is just like as a patient advocate, I'm sure you have a lot to say about that because
Yeah.
then as a patient, how did they receive that information? How did
Yes.
they
That's
what are
it.
they thinking when we're
Yeah.
so cold and stern and we're like, "Well, it is what it is, get
Yeah.
exercising and move on."
Yeah. I'm
Oh,
off for
we're
my coffee break.
yeah, like, "Oh, we're
Yeah.
so short-staffed today," like,
Yeah.
our patients don't need to hear all of that, right?
Yeah.
We can
Yeah.
express it and be human and have a bit of fun with it, but I think that's such an important I keep thinking I need to rename the podcast. I'm not gonna put
Mhm.
it out there, but I keep coming back to because every person I talk to talks about the importance of being human, like, the importance of
Yeah.
being human and seeing the human behind the nurse, so
Yeah.
I think that watch this space.
Yeah. And I think too, like most of the clients who I've engaged with who have had positive experiences, it is from the nurses who did cry with them when their baby was born or who did, hold their hand or, one of the most affirming moments I had for me that I was on the right path was the 5 minutes I went back to clinical education and I had a very sick man, all the machines and all the people and all the chaos. And I just held his hand and he was like, just don't let go. Like, I really
Mm,
like of all the things that we were doing for him, what he focused on was me holding his hand. And so that's where I stayed. And I feel like that was more beneficial for him than all the drugs, all the devices, all the everything, like that someone was there with him, So and particularly with, the C word life, it's so
mm.
hard for patients to have support of their own at the moment and still like so that's our job. So
Yeah, I think that the message there, right, is like what I love talking about, which is being basic makes you advanced. Like doing the
yes.
basics
Yeah.
makes you super advanced because there
Yeah.
are not many people actually commit to doing the basics well, and we kind of like have created this culture in the industry where it's like the more you get, the better, more advanced you become. And we seem to forget that our first
Yes.
job is to
Yeah.
deliver basic nursing care. And I know
Yeah.
it's like yawn, Liam, and I used to think that working on the floor because the dons, the educators, the nuns, they'd be like,
Mm.
we're going to do an education today on, getting back to the basics. And we'd all
Yeah.
roll our eyes like, are you for real? Like, I've been a nurse
I'm above basic.
like, I'm so much better than basic.
Yeah.
But the reality was, like, you look at the risk man data, the incident reporting, the quality and
Mm.
safety data, the patient advocacy work that you're doing. And I'd be curious to know, like, is a lot of it complex things that you're helping people with, or is it like real fundamental basics? Like, what does that look like?
A lot of it is just being seen and heard and not being dismissed. And yeah, a lot of it is that inferior care, like, you know, not communication is a huge one. I don't know what's going on with my husband, my mum. I don't, nobody's telling me anything. And, they don't know to ask certain things. So a
Mm,
lot of it's communication. And then, yeah, just being treated like a person. And that's something I've really learnt through the work that I've done is it's not the things that were or were not done. It's the way people were treated that is harmful.
mhm, mm, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Tell us more about that. Do you mean like in sense that So their experience, their lived experience in their bodies
Yeah.
is what's creating, like, trauma for them in that
Yeah.
experience, no?
So I've done a fair bit of work with postpartum mothers, so in birth trauma and wanting answers about why the birth played out the way it did. And a lot of the sentiment is no one listened to me. I was dismissed. I was treated like I didn't have a voice. And when patients step into the hospital, and I've experienced this myself, you are so vulnerable
Mm,
even with medical training and a bit of know-how, like the second you become a patient, you are so vulnerable and it's really hard to advocate for yourself. And we have this real belief that our doctor is right. We must do what the doctor says, our nurses as well. Um, but no one ever taught the doctors to ask the patients what they want. And,
mm,
particularly in the system where it's so policy and protocol driven and so risk averse and avoid litigation, tick your boxes, we're forgetting that that's a human in the bed and that they might have ideas that are different to ours and are different to what our policy and safety protocols suggest are the best thing
mm,
for people to experience. But at the end of the day, it's when no one listened to me, I wasn't allowed to do what I wanted to do, and they did this anyway,
mm.
is what hurts people. It's what they can't sleep at night over. It's what the complaint letters are about, was that no one listened to me and
Yeah.
didn't have a say.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, I can't talk too much on this at the moment, but I'm reading a book. It's called The Body Keeps the Score, and it's about
Love,
oh, it's like yeah, I'm
epic.
just
Yeah,
like my mind is being blown by this every
yeah,
page that I read. And for those listening, it's worth reading as a clinician, an amazing book, right? And it's all about trauma and how our body tells the story of the traumas that we've experienced. Sounds a bit sad, but it's
yeah.
very insightful, very evidence-based, and he's done a lot of incredible work, the author. And that's what comes up there. I know anytime I've been in the hospital, I've been in a few times for like minor operations. You're right, as soon as you walk through that door, you are, like, stripped. It's almost like you get
Yeah.
cleansed of everything, and it doesn't
Uh-huh.
even matter, and you're even, like, edging your way in, and we do this weird thing where we're like, "Do I tell them I'm a nurse? Do I not tell them I'm a nurse?" And you're like, and then you see somebody not washing their hands, and you're like, so I'm a nurse, but would you mind just washing your hands?" And it becomes
Yeah,
so awkward, right? There's so many things that go on for us as patients when we go into the system,
yeah,
um, that can really impact our outcomes, right? And I think
yeah,
that 9 times out of 10, as an educator, as a NUM, the problems that came through my door were issues that are based around the things that you would help people with. Like
yeah,
that asking for better care. Why was my mum's teeth
yeah,
not cleaned for the last 3
yeah,
days?
yeah,
Now, like, or
yeah,
no one's told us what's happening, or
yeah,
every MDT person that comes in tells us a different story.
yeah. And a lot of people it is, particularly with the mothers that I've worked with, is having to retell their story to each new shift that comes on. I know me personally, that was brutalizing because it was reliving trauma every 8 hours, because they gave
Mm,
it just a brief handover and you'd say, okay, it's time to breastfeed. And it's like, well, actually, I'm really struggling with that. And so that was hard to have to retell every 8 hours. And it's like, are you even listening to me? Do you even know me at all? Like,
yeah,
and having to just, yeah, go through it over and over again, every change of shift.
yeah.
It's really defeating. You just feel like, what's the point of being here? No one's listening to me. No
Mm.
one cares.
Mm. And do you find that people that also loses a lot of trust in the patients, with their providers? Because I know for me, when I'm in there, I'm like hell to the no. Like, if you've already
Yeah,
within seconds of meeting me, you've like
yeah,
stuffed up my name and like human
yeah,
things, like we're humans. But if that continues to happen through the day and I get asked the same question 50 times, my
yeah,
trust factor is like dropping significantly.
yeah,
And I think that we forget to marry the 2 together, and we're like, "We deserve to be treated better," and I agree, we do. But when we're,
yeah,
like, chipping away at the trust,
yeah,
like we're literally asking for it. I think. What's your take on that?
yeah. No, we are. And I used to teach students to go and learn one thing about your patient and not what their blood test results are, not who their doctor is, but what's their cat's name? You know, how many
Mm,
grandkids do they have? Go and tell me one thing about your patient that's not to do with the reason they're in hospital. And then you can see that patient as a person and remember their name, for God's sake, like not just bed 23 or,
mm.
you know,
The
and
appendicitis.
yes, and I know we're so guilty of that in emergency because we do have such a high turnover,
Mm,
and you're lucky if you've got your patients for 4 hours. And but you know, it doesn't take much to have a quick chat with the
mm.
person to get to know them even a little bit, and that I don't know, for me, that makes that person a person in my head, and I can remember better their clinical story as well as when I'm attaching it to the person who's in the bed in
Mm.
front of me. So
Yeah. I like
mm,
thinking of the patient care like, the quicker that you can deliver a quick win to a patient, like, and really connect with them, the
yeah,
easier days gonna be 9 times out of 10. Of course, there are humans that are just gonna make your life hell. They
mm,
exist, but, they're far and few between. But I
yeah,
believe that the quicker that you deliver something or even just connect, the simplest of things, clean their glasses, like, tidy
yeah,
their table, like
yeah,
make sure the room's presentable, make sure their hair's combed whilst the cleaner's coming in to do their breakfast, like the floor, not their breakfast. Those little things really count, right? So, what would be, from your patient advocacy perspective, what would be a couple of things that nurses could do, like today, tomorrow, in their clinical care to really improve the patient experience?
I think something that every nurse could easily do on a daily basis is communicate with family. We've
Mm,
got this real negative approach to the family, the visitors, and so many people are like, yes, no visitors in COVID. How much easier is life without visitors and the nagging and the questions and the demanding and stuff? But like you said, it's so easy to deliver just a quick, how's it going? I'm the nurse today. Do you have any questions? What are your concerns? Is there anything you need me to help you with or achieve for you? And that's it, like you said, your day's easy from there because number one, they trust you, they believe that you care. And if you can deliver an answer for them, well, hey, it's amazing. They feel connected, they know what's going on, and they feel
mm,
like their person is in good hands. So just embrace the visitor, embrace the loved one. And because I know when I was taught, particularly triage, you know, you want to hear the story from the horse's mouth. Don't let the wife speak for the husband. Don't let the mother speak for the child. You need the story from the patient. And I've always just been like, why? Your
mm,
patient's in crisis, your patient's sick. They can't, you know, and quite often people do get nervous and can't think what is necessary or important to say, where their mother might or their wife might or something like that. So, you know, they've brought that person with them, allow that
mm.
person to be part of their experience. Because, yeah.
It's so important, right? 'Cause yeah, I love that. I think that what's coming to mind is like it's preventative de-escalation. That's
Yeah.
what it is. Like you're
Yeah.
just preventing any form of escalation happening. And maybe once that will actually happen. But if you just,
Mm.
like you said, deliver a quick win, they're stable, doctor's been round, like it takes 30 seconds. There's no
Yeah.
reason why we can't. Um, so yeah, I love that so much. I wanted to dive in and explore as we kind of wrap up the amazing interview. Like, there's so much I could ask you, but I value your time. You mentioned earlier that you created space, you let this idea percolate, you had 12
Mhm.
months of like, just letting your creative juices flow. And then your brain was like offering you all these questions about like, how do I do it? Like, what does it look like? All of these things. Talk to us about like bringing the business to life. So I know there's a lot of people that listen that are
Yeah.
in a similar place, right? And I think a lot of us think that we need to know the how before we do. So I'm curious what your experience was.
The best life lesson I ever learned was leap before you know where you're going to land. And I had deliberately surrounded myself with women who were doing different things in their own field, in their own niche, and being entrepreneurial. And so people I want to be when I grow up kind of thing. So I had them in my awareness that I could idolize and go, well, if they can do it, I can do it. And it just
Mm,
took that, why can't I do it if they can do it? They're no different to me. And I knew that I had these people's support regardless of what I chose to do. So, yeah, I just I had a mentor who I actually signed up to a network marketing business,
Mm,
and me, educator, clinical brain, I was like, I'll learn all the products and then I will. And she was like, no, no, just do it. You just do it. And I'm like, what do you mean you just do it? It's like you just put your face on camera and you just do it and you figure it out as you go. And I'm like, what do you mean? Like I can't do that. And but she didn't give me a choice. It's like, yep, here's a meeting, we'll set it up, we'll invite the people, and we're going live in 2 hours kind of thing. And so I did it and it was okay.
yeah.
And so it's just that, I guess, letting yourself know that it will be okay and
Mm,
getting comfortable with that and that nervous system regulation. Just take a little bite and
mm,
hold your breath, and it's okay. Okay, I can take the next bite. And then so, yeah, I decided to invest in myself and I paid for a business coach. It was like a 6-week mums in business course
mm,
online. And that teacher taught me the basics, like how to do a PayPal account, or how to, here is someone who you can pay to build a website for you, or here is basic accounting, or which I
mm.
still suck at. Um,
Likewise.
just the fundamentals, because I've got no clue about business. So I invested in myself and my dream and got someone to teach me how to do those things. And then it was just about courage and
Mm,
having, because speaking out technically against healthcare system and sharing insider secrets and teaching people that the healthcare system is not all it's cracked up to be,
mm,
it's a very taboo subject and it's very scary, and I was very worried about the recourse from that. But over time, with the exposure, and
mm.
no one's come breathing down my neck so far, I've learned that it's okay to say what I have to say, and that if that helps someone along the way. So I don't know, I think it was just an easing in and
Mm.
trusting the journey and following it wherever it took me rather than where I took it kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah. I love that. I think that entrepreneurship is just like a whole different world, right? You have to be
Mhm.
willing to do all of the things, not know the outcome. You have to be willing to fail and put yourself out there. You have to be willing to go back on yourself and
Yeah.
also have your own back and to
Mhm.
potentially create things that don't exist. Right. Like I
Yes.
think that's what's so exciting about it, right? Like your potential is uncapped. And I think
Mhm.
that through that journey, I've learned that Liam 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago when I started this business was like so worried about what everybody would think. And now, like
Yes.
yourself, now I'm just like, you know what? Like I actively tell people to unfollow me. I'm like, if you don't like what I have to say, just leave.
Yeah.
I
That's
don't
it.
care.
Yeah. I know.
Because I
I
know that there are people that need that, right? And your patients
Yeah.
obviously need that too. And I love that growth journey. Sorry, I interjected. What were you gonna say?
I have a beautiful mentor who says that you will have in life equal parts support and challenge. So choose
Mm,
to focus on the support because they are balanced always. And if you have challenge, that's where you know you've made it. If there are people out there going, you're wrong, you can't say this, you're whatever, then you're like, that's a win. Because
yeah,
if someone's got an opinion against what I'm doing, then I'm getting attention
yeah.
and, taken as a positive. So that's really helped with me and my outspokenness, to know
Mm,
that, I'm not actively out there trying to offend people. I am very conscious of the words I use and the way I use them. But if I get a little bit of heckling, I'm like, oh, well, that's, a
yeah.
feather in my cap, because that means I'm getting a greater reach and I am challenging people's beliefs and perspectives, which is what I want to do. So,
Yeah, I think it's so important. I'm thinking about adding professional button pusher to my resume. So I think
yes.
that I think that's what we do. But even like at an educator level, if you're an educator, you're a CNS, you're a NUM, you're a professional button pusher. Like we
Yes.
resist the resistance, but we have to let it in. We have to experience it. I used to think it shouldn't be like this, and I was arguing with
Yeah.
reality instead of just being like, "Hey, no, like it's great that the team are rebelling." Because it means
Yes.
that we've triggered something. Let's explore this. Now we've opened it up and we've triggered that little point.
Yeah.
Let's try and make this work. So I think that's so important.
Yeah.
Incredible. That you're doing that. And I love what you said. I can do it. And if there's, I like telling people that if there's evidence in the world of it, it means that you can do
Yeah.
it too. I
Yes.
I, I think that's a beautiful
Yes.
sentiment. So if you were to give your like your past version of you any advice, like Kate that was like leaving the public sector C&E role and you're moving back to working at the bedside and you're starting your business, if you could give them one piece of advice, what would you what would you tell that version of you that you know now?
Um, Give yourself a minute to adjust because change is change. You can't avoid it
Mhm.
and it is uncomfortable. So just breathe into it and give yourself a minute and trust the process. Don't be afraid to take the next step because, whatever you can imagine as your next step being, you're capable of taking it. You can't imagine it if you can't do it, kind of thing. So,
Yeah, I love that.
yeah.
So good, so good. So tell us more about Patient Advocacy Plus, how people can get in touch with you, what services you provide. Take the next couple of minutes, tell us all the things, because there are going to be people that are going to want to use this. And I want you all, everybody listening, to tell people about it and share it. Tell us how people can work with you.
Thank you. So people typically contact me through my social media accounts. I'm at Patient Advocacy Plus on Facebook and Instagram. You can also search me up on my website, which is patientadvocacyplus.com.au. And the services mostly I provide health system navigation advice is my bread and butter. So when people are in crisis or anticipating an engagement with the healthcare system, they don't know what to do, they don't know who to trust or where to take the next steps. That's when people call me and say, I'm planning a pregnancy. What's the best way of going about achieving this goal? Or my doctor's telling me this. I feel uncomfortable with that advice. What are my alternative options? Or, my dad's sick in hospital and he's receiving inferior care. How do I ask for better? That kind of thing. So then I'll
Mhm.
give people a plan of next steps to take, alternative pathways that their provider may not have offered them and language to use in communicating with their bedside providers so that they get heard and using language that the healthcare provider can understand and take seriously rather than I'm really worried about dad. I don't know why, but then I can say, use this language, say these words, and you will get a response
Mm.
kind of thing. So the other service I do is an appointment buddy, which I love. I feel like that's where I really shine. Is I come along to patients' appointments with them, so that I can communicate for them for patients who don't feel like they have the confidence or have medical trauma as a past experience from their past experiences. I can go in and sit beside them and do the speaking for them, or just be, that solid energy beside them so that they can speak with confidence and know they're
Mm.
supported, and help translate the jargon. And of course, as a professional, you would understand, you get an appreciation for whether this is a good doctor or not, and just taking that information or awareness to the appointments with my clients to say, okay, we don't really love this doctor, let's try a different one. Or that doctor was great, they were really empathetic, they were patient, they listened, you've got a good one here, you can trust them. So just to help people, number one, understand what their doctors are telling them, and making sure that they're not being provided with biased information as well.
Yeah.
So that's, yeah, mostly that's my bread and butter. That's what I do. And then, if people have a healthcare concern or they're not really sure what's going on or what they need, then just call me and we can have a chat and see what I could do to support you. So I'm flexible in what I offer, but mostly empowered communication, teaching you how to communicate, recognize bias and inferior care, and ask for better.
I love that all so much. What an inspiration. Seriously, I think that there's going to be so many people listening that are inspired by your journey. I know a lot of us don't like talking to each other like this, but I feel compelled to just say that I think the work that you do is so, so important. I think that the future will look very different for healthcare with people like yourself doing this work. And
That is my dream.
I think that there will be a rising of patient
Yes.
advocates, because like to be honest, like I hadn't really heard of it, but now I've heard of it. I'm like, holy
Yeah.
shit, why do we not
Yeah.
have more of these, right?
Yeah.
So if you are somebody that's listening and you agree with myself and Kate and you're like curious about what it takes to become a patient advocate, connect, reach out. I'm sure Kate would be willing to talk you through
Yes.
what that looks like because I think that this, like coaching in healthcare, is the future.
Yeah.
Trauma coaching, mindset work for our patients and for our clinicians. I think we're We're pushing those professional buttons. We're doing all the things.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
thank you so much for doing this incredible work.
Thank
Kate,
you.
it has been a pleasure. I'm sure this will not be the last time that we have you on the podcast. Everybody go and check out Kate's Instagram, and all of the links that we've talked about today are in the show notes. Let us know what you thought of this episode. Let us know if you're inspired to deliver better care. And I think that Kate needs to get some merchandise that says "Ask for better."
Yes.
I feel like that is your slogan, and I just absolutely love it. Um, I think that itself will transform, patients' perspective and experiences and the way
I
that
hope
clinicians think about the
so.
care that we deliver. So thank you so much. Until next time, everybody, stay safe, stay forever curious, and we'll be dropping another career chat next month. We'll see you in the next episode. Thanks, Kate.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for watching the High Performance Nursing podcast. Make sure you subscribe and hit that bell for all future video notifications. If you want to dive deeper into this work, please come and join us in the High Performance Nursing membership. All the links are in the comments below. We would love to see you there and help you thrive within your nursing life, career, and mindset. Let's do this.